I went around the country doing induction sessions for our clergy, for our staff, for our volunteers, and it was really inspiring to see the number of people who give of their own time and who are so committed to making sure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated.
Hello and welcome to The Way. I'm Wendy Grace. Well, I think I'm probably similar to many parents across the country that thankfully I feel my parish and the Catholic Church in general nowadays is a very safe place for my children. But this doesn't happen by itself, of course. It takes plans, it takes policies, it takes volunteers, and it takes us not being complacent into this area, which is so important. Join with me in studio to discuss this. I have Aidan Gordon with me in studio who's working in this area of safeguarding in Ireland. Thanks for being with us, Aidan. There's a new policy now that's being worked on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, Wendy, we've a new policy which came into effect on the 11th of June last year, and it's a safe and welcoming church, which is the single policy for safeguarding children in the Catholic Church in Ireland. And it is the single policy that is in place across all 26 dioceses and across all of the congregations who have any ministry with children in either the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland.
And what sort of changes are in this policy, Aidan, compared to previous kind of iterations of it?
Yes. Well, I suppose this is the third national policy, the third single one church policy that we've had. The initial one was published in 2008. It was revised in 2016, and 2024 is our latest version. I suppose it was developed in response to some of the subtle changes in both civil law and in canon law to ensure that the Catholic Church in Ireland was still meeting its requirements, both nationally in terms of the legislation, but also then in terms of the changes which Pope Francis initiated and which he brought into the church through, for example, Vos Estis Lux Mundi, which places a lot of emphasis on the accountability of the leadership of the church. So, for example, one of our standards that we have is about leadership and accountability, and it provides, I suppose, a guide for bishops and for congregational leaders on the standards that they should strive to meet in order to ensure that all of our ministry with children is safe, so that we can give confidence to parents and to families that when children interact with the Catholic Church in Ireland, they're doing so in a safe way, in a safe environment.
And that's obviously something that everybody wants. What do you do? What's your role overall then in ensuring that this happens?
Yes. Well, I suppose from our point of view, I work in the national office, and the national board is sponsored by both the Episcopal Conference and by AMRI, which is the Association of Missionaries and Religious in Ireland. And our role and function is to develop the policy, but also to develop the guidance that goes along with the policy. So on our website, which is safeguarding.ie, you will be able to click on our policy, and underneath each of the three standards that we have in our policy, you will see around 300 pages of guidance. So that guidance informs every church body in Ireland as to how they should safely conduct their business. And it covers everything from the recruitment and selection of volunteers to adhering to the vetting legislation in terms of carrying out Garda vetting on all of our staff and all of our volunteers. It covers training, and it covers then also how we should respond when somebody comes forward and discloses to us that they have been hurt in the church in some way, shape or form as a child, how we then should respond in a pastoral manner to that individual. But it also reminds us of our obligations legally and how, so for example, mandated persons in the Republic of Ireland. So every priest, every confessed religious in Ireland is a mandated person. So it is a requirement under law that if they are aware that a child has been hurt or is in danger of being hurt, they must report that to the statutory authorities. So that forms part of our guidance.
Yeah, so it's making sure that the processes are very clear and they're in place.
Absolutely.
So people can navigate them. I remember just so many conversations that I've had over the years, Aidan, with people, which was one of the positives of an awful period in our history in terms of the failures in child safeguarding, is that now the Catholic Church on the whole is a very safe place for children. And indeed, it seemed to in these policies set the gold standard for other organisations. And I can
Yes.
see that in my own family with children and sports and different things like that. Is that still the case, and how do we make sure it stays the case?
Yes, well, I suppose we're very lucky in that all of our religious leaders in Ireland have bought into the policy and have signed up to adhere to the requirements of that policy. And they, in turn, have employed staff to make sure that the arrangements are in place within their individual organisations, to make sure that the organisation has got the appropriate arrangements in place. So every diocese and every congregation in Ireland has employed staff who are experts in safeguarding and from different professional backgrounds in order to make sure the arrangements are in place for safeguarding of children. So that includes making sure that all of our clergy and all of our religious are vetted, that when we're recruiting volunteers, we make sure we vet them, we collect references, we make sure make sure they attend the appropriate training. We also have volunteers. We have a huge number of volunteers. So every single parish in Ireland has safeguarding representatives in the parish.
And they have to be trained and everything.
They have
Yeah.
to be trained. They attend specific training, which is provided by the National Board, and they have to be trained, and they help the priest in the parish to make sure that the safeguarding arrangements are in place at a local level. So, for example, they make sure that if there is a children's choir in the parish, that the people who lead the choir are vetted, that they are recruited appropriately, that there is appropriate supervision of the children, that there is consent from the parents in relation to their participation in the activity. So without those people operating at parish level, we just couldn't do our work. But it provides an additional layer of reassurance to us and to families that their children are safe. I suppose we also have to make sure that we guard against complacency. That is, in my view, that's one of the biggest risks that we might have. So,
How do we make sure that doesn't happen in terms of, yeah, that idea of
Mm,
you're doing well, we've got good policies in place, we've got our
mm,
safeguarding officer, we're all guarded at it,
mhm.
but you can still let your guard down, can't you?
You can. Well, one of the requirements of our policy is that each church body must carry out a self audit every year. So they must inform us that they have carried that out. So we require each bishop and each congregational leader to write to me on an annual basis to provide me with an assurance that they have carried out a self audit of their organisation, and that any issues which arose in that self audit are form part of an action plan that their safeguarding committee will take forward in order to make sure that those deficits or any identified deficits are addressed. I suppose in addition to that, then each church body invites us in to carry out an independent review. So they're all published on our website. So once every 5 to 6 years, we would expect each church body to write to the National Board, invite us to come along and independently review all of the structures and the policies and the procedures and the guidance that they have in place in order to satisfy ourselves that they are meeting the requirements of our policy.
Yeah. And in terms of how important it is for people to, I've done the training myself, and
Right.
I have to say, I remember feeling, wow, this was great for my involvement in the children's liturgy in my own church,
Mhm.
just in general, for
Yeah,
the other things that I was involved in
absolutely. Yeah.
with my own family and my own children. It just opened my eyes to many different things, and I found it really, really useful. So that's
Good.
important for people to know. But how important is it to have the volunteers, for people to do the training, for the practical stuff to be done?
Well, it's absolutely vital. I suppose the biggest concern around, which I've already stated, around complacency for us is because we know how offenders work. We know that if we for a minute drop our guard, if we for a minute take our foot off the pedal or take our eye off the ball, we know that offenders will take advantage of that. They will exploit every single weakness in our system in order to put themselves in a position where they can offend. And I think we're in quite a strong position in the sense that there is a great awareness amongst the general public about child safety and child safeguarding, which is fantastic. And unfortunately, we've contributed to that knowledge because of the mistakes we've made in the past. But that is a really positive thing. There's much more coverage in the media around child safeguarding, which again is a positive thing. So it's been kept in the forefront of
But you
people's
still
minds.
sadly see stories across many different organizations of abuse still happening.
Hmm.
It's not something that has gone away. We're more, aware of it, but it's still a scourge that exists. So that's also where the complacency can't set in either. This isn't
Yeah.
a historical, hangover. It's something that still happens today, of course.
Yes, yes, and there are still offenders there, and no single organization can say your organization is 100% safe and children will not be harmed within your organization. We can't do that. But what we have to do is to do as much as we possibly can, everything within our power to make sure that children are kept safe. Because as a parent myself, I mean, I need to be reassured that if my children are involved in children's liturgy, if they're involved in church activities, that they are kept safe, and that the church has taken every step possible to make sure that those who would wish to offend have absolutely no chance of being involved in church activities. That zero tolerance approach is something that I think we have to maintain. And it's something which I think is absolutely congruent with gospel values. There's absolutely no conflict between the values of the gospel and the values of safeguarding. And when you look at the Gospel of Mark and chapter 10, and Jesus, said, "Let the little children come to me." That is what we have to do. And as church, in my view, safeguarding has to be integrated into all of our ministry.
Yeah, it's so key. It's so important. I imagine, Aidan, though, you need buy-in from. And obviously, I know it's across the board in the country in terms of,
Mhm.
on the in the big picture in the parish level, but you need buy-in from lay people. You need volunteers to keep volunteering.
Mhm.
What do you need from people that might be watching or listening?
Well, I suppose to get involved, I have to say, I suppose it's been really inspirational for me when we were introducing our new policy. I went around the country doing induction sessions for our clergy, for our staff, for our volunteers, and it was really inspiring to see the number of people who give of their own time and who are so committed to making sure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated. And I think that's really key. So I would encourage people to get involved because it is such a rewarding activity. It is fantastic to when you go around to the country and you see children's choirs, when you see confirmation ceremonies and first communion ceremonies where the children are actively involved in the liturgies. It brings such a life to the liturgy, and it brings such a life to the church. And I think it's one way of us making our contribution towards the future, because we I think amongst young people today, there's certainly they're crying out for some sort of a sense of meaning, and I think it's a huge opportunity for us as a church to give them that sense of meaning, but we have to do it safely. And as was my job and the job of the national board is not to evangelize, but it's to give you the church the tools in which that evangelization can take place safely.
Yeah, so the message is for people who want that. I know so many
Yeah.
people watching, listening. That's what we want our churches to be, of course, safe places, but places where our faith can thrive, where young people can thrive. So this is key. So listen, it's been lovely to have you with us today, Aidan, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the area of safeguarding. Of course, thanks to all those who are already volunteering. But maybe you're watching this or you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know what particular gifting I'm meant to give to my church. This could be a really good place to start. So maybe that's your call today to maybe get involved in this particular area. Thanks so much for being with us on the way today.